Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to Strategic Affairs with Mark Chandler. I'm Mark, and so let's get started with today's episode. Today is episode 4, and I'm going to change things up a little bit because normally we like to talk about international issues, but I told you in episode 1 that sometimes we're going to go into domestic issues as they arise, and today is one of those times. Episode 4 is about media bias, and I think it's something that we need to look at as we head into the next few months with a lot of current events that are coming out there, but in general, just what happens. As a reminder, our objective is to inform you of current events. And generally that is international, but as I said, today's on a domestic issue. I'm going to use my tried and true intelligence processes to kind of present the facts to you as they exist out there. And we're going to start a little bit about the media, the fourth estate, if you will, and go into that process. And we're going to start with some facts, and we're also going to go into some tried and true intelligence methodologies and understanding to help bring better focus for you, the consumer, into media bias. But first, if you don't mind, I'm going to refer to a little bit of notes because I want to talk about journalism standards. And the primary journalism standards include that they are to provide truth and accuracy. They are to be independent, independent of political considerations or political messaging, or independent of an agenda. They are supposed to be fair and impartial in their reporting. They're to minimize harm. In other words, they don't go out with a story intended to harm individuals. And then they're supposed to be accountable. When they make a mistake, they should admit that mistake. They should admit that mistake with the same headline or the same focus on a newscast that they did when they first made that mistake. And so those are the core principles that journalism students are trained to. It just seems to me that after they leave journalism school, they tend to forget those standards. And that's what we'll talk about today. But before I get into that, let me talk about you, the media consumer. In that, you have a great deal of responsibility in how we deal with the media. In other words, you're an active consumer, an active listener. And so I'm going to talk about 3 biases that we discuss in intelligence analysis. And those biases, the first 2 for you, are confirmation and anchoring. And what are those? Well, first off, confirmation bias includes only seeking information that you already believe or information that confirms how you believe or approach an issue, regardless of what might change. And how you get on that and how you stay with confirmation is you anchor to that belief, or you anchor to what you perceive as the facts, and you ignore any contrary information to that. Those 2 are very bad in analysis because situations change, situations evolve, and we must be open to looking at alternative sources and alternative ideas and alternative meanings out there. So that's your responsibility as a media consumer. But now let me talk about the media themselves and their bias. All media is biased. I'm not focused on any particular network or news source. I'm focused on all media. In other words, their bias begins when they choose what story they are going to cover and then how they're going to cover it. They frame that story, they frame that situation. Usually you see it, especially in today's social media environment, with dramatic headlines. And a lot of you on social media call it clickbait. I'm going to look at this headline because it's very dramatically informed out there, when actually the story is nothing like that, or the details are much less dramatic. But that's what media does to get users out there. So they're going to come across with headlines. What I'm asking you to do is look carefully at those headlines and look beyond the adjectives or the explosive words. See, I just imprinted an idea in you with explosive words out there to talk about how you can hear a certain word and it's going to imprint an idea in your head. the media capitalizes on that because they want you to already start anchoring to an idea that they have, and they do that through the first few words of a story, or they do it through a headline. So we have to be careful with the framing effect. We have to then go through the facts. What I would tell you is let's try to ignore what the adjectives are that a network publishes, or that a newspaper, or a magazine, or an online news source. The adjectives are words that they choose from their perspective to articulate a certain angle of the story. The best thing I can tell you to do is one, don't anchor. Two, be open. Three, look at multiple news sources. That's the most critical thing. And as I do open source intelligence, I go across a lot of different news outlets to try to find what the grain of truth is in a particular story. And that's something that we have to do. I can't anchor to a certain point. I can't just take on the news media that gives me the political agenda or the angle of a story that makes me feel comfortable or that supports my ideas. Now, there are people out there who are going to only listen to this network and ignore this other network, or say that network is very biased. By doing that, you're admitting you're biased. You're admitting you're anchoring. So I just urge you now, become a smart media consumer. Look through and be aware of those three critical biases that are at work. Your responsibility are the two biases that you control: anchoring and confirmation. Your next responsibility is to look at what the media is doing. And we can make a change. We can demand the media become more fair, become more accurate in their reporting, and that they can be independent. Perhaps we'll get back to those old days when the media reported the facts, when the media didn't embellish a story. If we do that, if we demand that from our media, then I think we will be a better informed public. And that's what it's all about, being a better informed public. So thanks for tuning in for today's episode. I appreciate your time. As a reminder, you can find us on Spotify and YouTube. If you want to know more about the services that CASIL offers, please refer to our website at mark-chandler.com. If you want to write us an email, you can find a link there to write us an email and request some services, or you can see the other services that we offer, and you can go ahead and read some of our blog posts and see if I conducted any kind of framing or if I conducted any kind of confirmation bias on there. But I urge you to look at other websites, and you can look at some of the interviews we posted and for yourself do some research and find the biases that I talked about. Again, thank you for tuning in to Strategic Affairs with Mark Chandler, and have a great day.